Courtney Barnett is an Australian singer-songwriter who broke out in 2015. Feels like ages ago since that album came out. Like, wow. But yeah, she actually had some EPs in 2013. Had the amazing song Avant Gardener on there, one of my favourites by her easily. But 2015 was the year that she broke out and gave more to offer with her album. I remember specifically loving the album, and then right at the end of the year I returned to the album and it was not the album that I thought it was. Yeah, it was one of those albums that I had a drastic opinion change on. Not often that happens, but that is certainly one I remember pretty well. I mean, sure, songs like Depreston and Pedestrian at Best still were really good and still are really good, and Pedestrian at Best probably again, like Avant Gardener, being one of her best songs, mostly because it's a bit more grungier, a bit more alt rock influenced. I just think the instrumental on that track is probably her most exciting that she's ever done and ever been on. Because really I just find much of the instrumentals that she jumps on pretty boring, pretty bland. I don't think she has a lot to offer in terms of uniqueness as a singer-songwriter, and the only thing that you can say that she's got that's different is her sort of mundane attitude. You know, the album being called Sometimes I Sit and Think, Sometimes I Just Sit. You know, it's kind of like self-awareness, that kind of like self-mockery, you know, just making a joke out of really simple things. Just, I like that attitude of her. She's kind of just here to take things easy, you know, it's quite easygoing, she's not too serious, and she does it well, to be honest. I mean, you can't argue with what she has to offer. It's definitely different to what a lot of other singer-songwriters do. That doesn't mean I find it interesting though, because I really don't. I find a lot of her songs to be incredibly average from a songwriting perspective. Lyrically, there's never much that stands out at all. And again, it's obviously part of her shtick, a part of her personality. It fits her personality pretty well, but you know, if you're listening to it, what's there to take away from it that's really that interesting? And on this new album here, I think we're kind of entering that same territory again, although I do think a few tracks stand out this time around. Definitely have a bit more brightness to the sound of them. City Looks Pretty is just a perfect example of what like 2000s indie music sounded like at its best. You know, that really like nicely tuned guitar playing, and you know, a really melodic chorus as well, just very much like your Sleater Kinney and bands like that from the 2000s, bit of 90s influence in there too. And in all fairness, there's a bit of melody on this track in her vocals, because usually, again, like I say, she kind of plays it very monotonous, which is supposed to be cool. Yeah. And I think that's the problem with her. I feel like people who are sort of like outsiders consider her sort of like to be this cool person because she's not like everyone else, but sometimes not being like everyone else isn't that exciting, you know. It's a bit overrated to try and fit outside of the box because you end up sounding a bit dull, like here. Not an insult to her as a person. I mean, obviously I'm sure she's a pretty decent person, I wouldn't argue against that. It's just when, you know, you put pen to paper and write some songs and it comes out a little uninspired, you can't help but feel like, well, what are you going for here? I don't get it. And that's certainly the issue with much of the second half of this album. I mean, I really get nothing from most of the tracks. I know that kind of sounds like I'm just grouping all those tracks into one and not really going into detail about them, but like, it's really hard to pull anything out. I mean, what is there to offer here? It's really just vapid. It's like nothingness. It's like half of the album just doesn't really go anywhere, which was literally the issue with Sometimes I Sit and Think, because again, you had a few highlights and then you got everything else that just was like white wallpaper, like an entire house covered in white wallpaper, because that's all you've got, you know, and that's it. You just got nothing else to say or do because it's all just the same. And yeah, I just don't get what it is about it that's appealing. I mean, why, like, dude, like, what is there to like about her? I mean, it's just it's one of those things that baffles me, honestly. Need a Little Time at least is a more interesting track from a writing perspective. You know, she's talking about how like this person seems to know a lot about her. I guess it could be like attacking people that critique her, maybe, or it could just be about someone that she knows who's constantly on her, on top of things, who thinks they know her as well as they think they do, but they actually really don't. Either perspective is actually pretty okay for the song. It works well. Again, I think this is the kind of track that works at her best because there's like that shyness to her which she plays with a lot, and when she does it with an instrumental that actually sounds quite good, it amplifies what she's trying to do quite well, I think. Usually what happens with Courtney Barnett is that there's a really dull instrumental and then she's doing the same sort of like shyness, nerdy type thing going on, and it like doesn't really give you anything, whereas this one at least the instrumental is a bit better, so therefore you feel like you can understand her a little bit more, which I appreciate that she's got a track like this on the album, because if it wasn't for tracks like this and City Looks Pretty, I just don't know what I would have said about it. Like I said in the Courtney Barnett Kurt Vile review back in like November or whenever that came out, you know, both of them are just really simple singers, so when you just put simple singing over like basic like chords and basic drums, it's just like, what is that here? I don't get it. Like, you know what I mean? You know? But the opening track actually offers a little bit more. I mean, it's a really dark, like post-punk, just menacing instrumental. Like, holy shit, I've never heard it do anything like this before. And it gave a really odd tone setter for the album, because I was like, what is this album gonna be? But then it kind of switched up pretty quickly from there. But as an opening track, it certainly give off an eerie sound to it, which I feel like she did incredibly well. Would definitely be interested to see if she played with this sound again in the future, like on her next album she just went with these really dark, like Chelsea Wolfe inspired instrumentals. I would totally be up for that and see what she'd go with see where she'd go with that. I already reacted to Nameless Faceless. Still the same issues crop up with this track as they did back when I reacted to it. Sure, some important things she's saying on the track, it just leads to a really boring chorus, really flat, and some of the perspectives she takes on the track are really extreme. Like, she saw a few people get mad on the internet and that's what influenced this song. Like, I don't know, I just don't really buy into it. Like, just because a man might disagree with you online doesn't mean he sat in his bedroom raging with anger and like, oh, women are the worst. Oh. No, like, that's not the way it works. Clearly you just can't handle a bit of disagreement online, which is literally the summary of what the internet has become now. I mean, sure, there are idiots on the internet that say stupid, sexist leading comments all the time, or even just outright sexist things altogether, which I never agree with. But when you pair that up with the fact that, you know, women have issues with walking alone at night because they're worried about what's going to happen to them, it really takes away from the impact of what that means, you know? Like, you can't just say, oh well, we have this problem but you do this. Like, you should have just made the whole song about how hard it is for women to be you know, like, feel like they're gonna be a victim of some kind of crime when they're alone. That would have been a perfect song and that would have really hit hard. But instead we have a track that's like, well, men do this but women do this. And it's like, well, I just don't have time for that, you know? You should have just had the entire song focusing on that, you know? That would have been fine, but I just think it fails as a song, to be honest. I'm sure many people would disagree, because I saw a lot of praise for this track when it first came out. I felt like I was the only one that didn't like it, to be honest, but hey, I don't know. Yeah, that's really as much as I've got to say about most of these songs. I mean, one of the tracks, I think it's Need a Little Time, where she's like, just shave your hair and, you know, emotionally it might improve yourself. I don't know if this is meant to be a metaphor, but it's one of those things that's like, it's a metaphor, but just because it's a metaphor doesn't make it work. Which I know a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, it is a metaphor, you just don't get it. But like, you know, not every metaphor that happens ever is listenable or is like intriguing. You know, it's just like one of those things that's like, no, this what you want about. And yeah, I get maybe I'm missing the point because the mundaneness is like the biggest appeal of Courtney Barnett, and she's obviously not going to change that. That's fine. But I'm sorry, I just like my singer-songwriters to have flavour. Like, I like singer-songwriters to make music that sounds interesting and they sing about things that are interesting. Like, is that a problem? Like, do you not like that? If you're going to call this one of the best of the year, that's fine, but I would highly recommend listening to Saba's Care For Me album, because he has some really good, like, well-written tracks on there. We've got Courtney Marie Andrews, some amazing songs on her album. US Girls, even Jeff Rosenstock's album, which I overrated a little bit when it first came out, but it's still pretty good. And, you know, definitely has some good tracks on there that are well written. Open Mike Eagles album. Randy Newman's album from last year. Open Mike Eagles was last year too. Alex Cameron, like, the list goes on. Susan Sunford's album from last year. Snow Allegra. Holy shit, man, the list goes on, and I just don't really have time for this kind of thing. I just find it very average. It just does nothing for me. Yeah, D+. Sorry, I'm a bit negative here. I feel like I've been really negative with albums lately, but not a lot's been impressing me over the past 2 weeks. So that's a huge shame. But if you like this album, that's great. Do tell me why and what I got wrong. Subscribe to the channel if you like this review. Comment as well, you know, all your thoughts and opinions. And that's all. Have a good day.